I'm home. This is the Confessions of an Arcade Addict podcast, an introspective look into video gaming from the classic era until today. Now here is your host, Brian.
Hey folks, what's going on out there? Brian here, and this is episode number 18 of the Confessions of an Arcade Addict podcast. As far as gaming goes, I haven't been doing too much. Playing a little emulation here and there. Nothing that I have on Steam is really catching my fancy right now. Sort of in a gaming malaise, if you will. I don't have the funds to go to the arcade in Brighton, and I haven't hit Pinball Pete's as of late. I mentioned in episode 17, but I did finally check out Marvin's Marvelous Mechanical Museum. I'm going to consult my list of places to check out in the Detroit area, and probably the end of this week, this being Saturday, October 26th when I'm recording this, I'll probably head out there after work on Friday and check a place out and see what it is, and give my impressions and so forth, and then just go from there. So as always, stay tuned. I check my emails. My email box is empty. If you want to get a hold of the show and contribute or have suggestions or anything of that nature, just get a hold of me at Just get a hold of me at arcadeaddictbrian@gmail.com. Also, there's a phone number for voicemails. That number is 734-743-2433. Also, there is a strong social media presence. Facebook, just search for Confessions of an Arcade Addict. And by the way, thank you to all those who have liked and followed that page. I check Facebook every day, not just for the podcast, but to keep in touch with friends and to check out and check back with family and so forth. So I see people, a few here, a couple here, 5 here, 6 here, 3 here, and liking and following the page, and I want to thank each and every one of you that are listening. Also, you can get a hold of me on Twitter at arcadeaddict_B. At Instagram, it is at arcadeaddictbrian. And Tumblr is tumblr.com/blog/confessions of an arcade addict. So if you want to get a hold of the show and speak your mind, as long as you're civil about it, say what you will. I'm here for you. So with all that done, let's move on to the show. I've got quite a bit to discuss, so let's get right into it. Let's go into top 10s. Top 10s. 1987. Now, let's see. 1987, I'm now 18 years old. Although, if I'm going to be brutally honest about myself, I may be 18 physically, but I'm more like 15. Mentally and emotionally. I was a bit of a late bloomer that way. I'm still hanging out at the arcades as much as I can. Now, let's see. I want to say in August of 87, that's when I got my job at CVS, and I was with them for almost 2 years after that. And once I did that, and thanks to my best friend Rob, who, put in a good word with me with the manager and got me the job, I was able to, make a little money for myself, contribute back to the house with my grandfather and my mother at the time, and also, have some money to kick around with. It wasn't a lot. I think I was working part-time to begin with. I don't think I went close to full-time until probably sometime in 88. But either way, I had a little bit of pocket change now. So yeah, I'm still collecting comic books. I'm still, like I said, going to arcades wherever I can, and going out, hanging out with friends and so forth. The typical teenage stuff. Let's see. Like I've been noting in each of the years in top tens, especially after 1983, arcades were on a slow decline. 87 is no different. Arcades were not, they weren't conducting a lot of business during the day until probably I'd say probably about quitting time for, people who are working, or maybe even after school, for, high school students and so forth. I was still, before I got the job that I had, I was still hanging out the malls and arcades as much as I could. So, I saw that business was still on the decline. And the other thing I also noticed that there weren't that many, no, let me rephrase that. There were good games coming out, but they were not as frequent as they were in past years. It took me a little while to comprise this list and the lists to come because, like I said, there weren't as many good games coming out, but they were there. It's just they were also spread out amongst the locales that I would frequent, so I didn't see them all in one spot. I would see them in different places. But anyway, let's get right onto it. As always, this is a top 10 in no particular order. Just I felt these were the best games that came out in that year. So let's get right to it. Afterburner. This, I think, was the game of 1987, in my own opinion. It was released by Sega. It was another one of their, I want to call it Mode 7 games or something like that. I should just look this up. But it's a particular processing, a method of processing that, that gave a really good 3D effect for their games, like, Afterburner, Space Harrier, Outrun, Hang On, and Super Hang On. And it just made for a really good arcade game experience, and Afterburner was no different. Now, trying to remember the first place I saw Afterburner, I think it was the News Corner, believe it or not. It was either News Corner or it was Milford Rec. It was one of the two. But this game was just fantastic to play. I mean, of course, this is following the massive success of the movie Top Gun, which came out in 1986. Just like in Top Gun, you are flying an F-14 Tomcat fighter through various stages. You're dealing with enemy aircraft of all kinds. They're trying to shoot you down. They're trying to hit you with missiles. And the trick was to draw enemy fire to the spot where you were and then peel away from that fire, from the enemy missiles or gunfire, so that you could actually return fire. And of course, there was a crosshairs, that not even a crosshair, but it was a aiming reticle. That's what it was. It was an aiming reticle that you would put it over an enemy aircraft that was, coming towards you. Then it would turn into like a red X. You would press the missile button on the top of the control stick, and it would fire missiles at that and destroy them. You also had guns. That was a trigger on the control stick, and you also, of course, had your thrust control, which was, which would slow your, if you pushed up, it would slow your fighter down, and when you pulled back on it, it would trigger afterburners. Of course, the thing that a lot of people love to do with this game is to make your fighter barrel roll. It was a great way to avoid enemy fire. Basically, you would quickly move the joystick in one direction, then you would jam it to the opposite direction, and your fighter would do a barrel roll. It didn't make your fighter immune to enemy fire. You could still get shot down in the middle of it, but it was a really cool effect. I mean, the stand-up version of Afterburner was uh, awesome enough, but I actually was able to. I'm trying to remember where it was. It was an arcade in Florida, if I'm not mistaken, but that was the first time I actually played an Afterburner sit down, and that one, of course, would move the move the entire machine up and down as you were moving your fighter up and down. It was mechanically controlled that way, and that was just a completely different experience altogether. I mean, this was the one of the best games, if not the best game of 1987, in my opinion. Okay, Avengers. This one I thought was something else, but when I decided to do some research into some of these games, because I haven't played some of these games in 30 years plus, I found out this was a vertically scrolling beat 'em up by Capcom. This wasn't what I thought it was. I thought this was Captain America and the Avengers, but that game did not come out until 1991. But I do remember playing this. It's more or less a combination of like Kung Fu Master and Gunsmoke. Basically, you are a fighter trying to defeat the boss of this massive gang, and you're rescuing damsels in distress as you're doing so. You have punches and kicks. There are various types of enemies that some of them will try to grab you and like headbutt you and do damage. Some will throw explosives at you. Some will throw projectiles at you, and so on and so forth. And there are also, just like in Gunsmoke, there are these garbage cans strewn around the levels that you can shatter with your punches and kicks to get power-ups. And, it just goes on like that. I mean, I remember playing this game. I wasn't good at it then, but, I just played it for research today, and I actually did pretty well. But, yeah, this is one of those I've only seen in one or two places. I think Bolorama's game, they got it for their game room for a little while. I think that's where I saw it. Because I remember Mark got me into this game. But yeah, it's a really cool game. Different, but using some of the same elements that Capcom vertical scrollers were famous for. Starting with like 1942. But anyway, yeah, it's a good game. Blades of Steel. This is the hockey version of Double Dribble, pretty much. As a matter of fact, if I was to be completely honest about it, it's a hockey version combining elements from both Super Basketball and Double Dribble. It's like you would think. You're a hockey team, 5-on-5, and basically it's the same thing. It's timed. Each quarter you put in gives you a minute of time, but there's a little bit of a difference in this one. When you score a goal on the on the opposition's goalie, you get 30 seconds added to your time. If they score on your goalie, you lose 10 seconds. And I played a full game. The first time I played Blades of Steel in the arcade since probably 1987, because I think I maybe spent about $1 on it because I just wasn't good at it. I didn't understand hockey at the time, but then again, I'm an 18-year-old kid, so I wasn't really into watching hockey a lot, even though there was plenty of opportunity. We had the Madison Square Garden network on our cable system, but anytime I saw an Islanders or a Rangers game, I just wasn't very interested. I wanted to watch the Knicks or the Nets. I was much more of a basketball guy. But yeah, so like I said, if you score on their team, you get 30 seconds added to your time. If they score on you, you lose 10 seconds. Of course, the attraction for Blades of Steel is that you can actually fight. If you check somebody or they check you or something like that, you can actually entangle and start a fist fight, just like in a real hockey game, where they'll use one hand to grab the other person's jersey and then they'll deliver punches with the other hand. And it's just the same way in Blades of Steel, and you basically have to inflict enough damage to knock out your opponent before your opponent knocks you out. And basically, what happens is if you get knocked out, or whoever gets knocked out in the fist fight, they get control of the puck. So yeah, I mean, I played a full game just to remember what it was like, and well, I've played several hockey games over the years, so I know what's going on. So I actually did fairly well, although I lost 15-14. Playing a full game. So yeah, Blades of Steel. It's a great game. A lot of people swore by the Nintendo Entertainment System version of this game, but the arcade game is superior, of course. That goes without saying. Contra. What more do I need to say about this game? I mean, it was fairly popular in the arcades. There were a couple of places. I know Milford Rec had it. The News Corner got it for a little while. But it didn't really get famous until it came out for the Nintendo Entertainment System. And once it did, I think it came out for the NES in like 1988 or something. I'd have to look it up. But yeah. I mean, everybody who is a gamer knows about this game. Has either played it or has seen it played. Let's see, there are several versions of this game, going from the arcade version to the NES version to Super Contra for the Super Nintendo system, which was like one of the first games that came out in like 1991. But yeah, I think there's another sequel to Contra. I just can't remember what it is. The Japanese name for Contra is Grisor. It came out as Grisor in Japan, and they changed it to Contra when it came to the US. That was fairly common for a lot of video games in that era. So yeah, Contra.
Double Dragon. Now, if Afterburner wasn't the best game of 1987, Double Dragon certainly was. I mean, in my eyes, it's 1 and 1A. You could interchange these two games, as often as you want. They're both excellent. This, of course, was one of the first real true beat-em-ups, a legendary beat-em-up. Of course, they made a movie about it. There are at least 3 sequels. I think 3, if not more. But yeah, I love this game. I mean, I've played it obsessively in the arcade, on emulation, on the NES. They did do Super Double Dragon for the Super Nintendo Entertainment System. I played that. My favorite, of course, is Double Dragon 2, which I will get to. That's one of my top 10s for, what year was that? 1989, I think? But we'll see. Okay, so, I mean, what more do I need to say about it? It's Double Dragon. I mean, one of the best fighting games of all time. Bar none. I mean, I put this game up against any other fighting game, including Street Fighter 2, which I think is the best of all time. That deserves its place in at least the top 5, in my opinion. Okay, Flying Shark. This one is a shooter, vertically scrolling shooter. This is when vertically scrolling shooters really started coming into their own, at least in my opinion. With this one, you basically, it's, about the typical of each one. I mean, this one is, you're flying a World War II biplane that's kind of special looking, let's say, and you're basically trying to, defeat the big boss at the end by going through various stages. All you have are your guns and your bombs. 1942, of course, kind of started this genre, really. I mean, I could be wrong about that, but
That's the game that really kind of brought the vertically scrolling shooters into their own. But Flying Shark was another good one. And as you go through each stage, you would destroy enemy red formations to get power ups to power up your guns. And the more power ups you got, the wider your firing arc became. And that's good because the game gets really hard, really fast. And just like most Japanese shooters, they can be really unforgiving. But it is fun to play. It's not my favorite. We'll get to that in a minute, but it's still kind of fun to play. I still mess around with it in emulation from time to time. Gondomania. This one really captured my imagination because this was basically like Star Wars speeder bikes. Data East put this out, and I think this is a really good game. I mean, it flies under the radar because it just doesn't have the notoriety that a lot of other games that came out in this year have. Basically, what it is that you are flying a speeder bike and you're going through various stages. You have a control stick which has an 8-way gun turning, control on the top of the stick, and of course you got your fire buttons. This one is different because as you defeat enemies, they leave coins on the ground, and you pick up those coins, and then you can actually, as you're going through the stage, there will be spots where they'll have certain weapons or certain power-ups on the ground, and you basically pick them up and exchange a certain amount of coins for them. A lot of the weapons are they don't have a certain number. They have limited. What's the term I want to use? They basically have a limit to how many shots you can use with them. And of course, depending on what kind of weapon it is, they have different effects. Some are long range, some are like fireballs, some are bombs, and things like that. So as you're going through further and further through the game, as you're killing enemies and picking up the coins they leave, you're able to continually power up your speeder bike, and it can get a little hectic. I've never finished this game. I mean, I loved playing it. I mean, Carl Graff's record store was the first place I saw it. The News Corner got it for a little while. And I think, no, there was an arcade in Orlando. I think it was the Fun Machine. I'm not 100% sure, but I think it was. I think it was the Fun Machine that had Gondomania, and that was like the first time I had played it since I'd left Connecticut. I still play it in emulation too, but it's a little bit of a pain in the butt getting the controls right. So yeah, Gondomania, one of my all-time favorites from this era, and quite honestly, it's underrated as a game. Twin Cobra. This one is my favorite vertically scrolling shooter. You are a helicopter pilot. You're piloting your chopper through various levels. Again, trying to defeat the boss at the end. I mean, it's pretty much the same premise as most vertically scrolling shooters of the time. But in this one, it was different because with this one, you could actually choose what style of firepower you wanted to utilize against the enemy. You started with the red shots, which turned out to be like small missiles, and as you kept powering up your helicopter, the area of shots would get wider. It would just be like this. It would just get really silly towards when you maxed out the firepower. Then you had the green, which was like laser machine guns, which gave you a really, really strong
field of fire, but the field was very limited. It was only, at least 2 green beams coming from your chopper. I mean, once you maxed it out, the destructive power was really good, really high. But unfortunately, you had to line your shots up with the enemies. I mean, it was good for killing bosses because you could go through the boss uh, enemies fairly quickly if you knew what you were doing, but it wasn't my favorite. My favorite was the next one. It was the blue ones, which would fan out in like, it started at like a 45-degree arc, and the arc would just increase as you powered it up, and also the shots and emit from your chopper, they would have more and more destructive power towards the end. That's my favorite. I would go through like 2/3 of the game with just those. And of course, the last one is the yellow one, which would shoot in 4 directions. The power up sequence was like it would increase the firepower for shooting forward first, then it would do the sides, then the rear. And after a while, once you max that out, it was like equally destructive firepower in 4 directions. I mean, that one requires quite a bit of skill to use properly. I mean, I tried doing it, but it just wasn't for me. But anyway, I can go on and on about Twin Cobra. I love this game, and I always have. But let's move on. Street Fighter. Now, this isn't Street Fighter 2. This will be in top 10s of 1991. Trust me, just be patient. I will get to it. This is the precursor. This was the original. I remember seeing this game for the first time in Milford Rec. They got 2 Street Fighter machines, and they were both the ridiculous, gigantic attack button, that they would have. And the harder you hit the button, the stronger the attack would be. And it just did not work. It wasn't in Milford Rec for very long because people wanted to play Street Fighter back then, but that button was just ridiculous. I mean, I think if I went and looked on Wikipedia or looked up some information about the game, I think they figured out that it was not a really good gimmick to have, and then they came out with the row of 6 punch buttons, light, medium, and strong, depending on whether it was a punch or a kick. The gameplay itself, even without that, was really rough. You, of course, played Ryu, and you were going through every enemy to get to Sagat at the end, because that was the story, was that at least from what I understand, Ryu was still discovering or trying to control his powers. And during this tournament, he got through all of his opposition to face Sagat at the end. And, of course, Sagat is this ridiculously tall, I think he's like 7'5", Thai kickboxing champion. And they would fight, and basically Ryu couldn't control his power when he decided to dragon punch him for the first time, and basically scarred Sagat's chest, and that started the feud between he and Ryu that you would see through all of the other Street Fighter games, going from Street Fighter 2 into Street Fighter Champion Edition, going into Super Street Fighter, and so forth and so on, all the way through. But yeah, I mean, this game, it had potential, but I don't think that Capcom quite had it down yet. But this was certainly a harbinger of what was to come later. So yeah, Street Fighter. Shinobi. This game, oh my goodness. I can't even think about how many times I played this game in the arcades. In Bolorama, Bolorama's game room, in the news corner. Almost every arcade that I ever went to had Shinobi. It was really, really popular. You are a ninja on basically it's a side-scrolling platformer, side and vertically scrolling actually. Once you get to like level like three, mission 3 or whatever, but basically you are trying to uh, defeat the ninja master at the end, and you're having to go through his lieutenants, which are very difficult to defeat. Mid bosses, not mid bosses, but end of stage bosses, and they were. This game was tough. You had to learn how to move, how to jump, how to shoot while you were jumping. It taught you a lot of things, and it was a really hard game to. It was an easy enough game to learn how to play it, but it was really difficult to master. I've watched a video a couple of years ago on YouTube of a guy who went through Shinobi on I think like maximum difficulty, and I think he set a world record or something like that. But it's a great game. I still mess around with it on emulation. Okay, honorable mentions. 1943. Of course, this is the sequel to 1942. This one is a little. It's the premise is the same, but it's a little bit different in its execution. Now you're able to power up your fighter with different types of firepower, and that firepower only lasts for a certain amount of time. And now you're having to defeat not only aerial targets, but now you go up against ground targets of different types, most ships mostly. But yeah, I mean the enemies are a little different. The scoring is a little different, but I found 1943 to be much more enjoyable than 1942, which could be really frustrating at times. Alien Syndrome. This one was put out by Sega. This one was, I think they basically saw the movie Aliens, which had come out in '86, and they decided to just take the whole alien mythology and sort of put their own spin on it. And they came up with this game, which was a lot of fun. Basically, you're going through different spaceships, rescuing captured humans from the aliens, killing humans as you go. I mean, killing aliens as you go through the various levels. And you have to basically rescue all of the humans and get off of the ship before the ship explodes. And I thought this was a great game, even though it's really frustrating. It's one of those games where, like, let's say Robotron, where you can fire in 8 directions, but your enemy can move in like 64 or something like that. Just a ridiculous area of movement for the enemies. And, sometimes you have to position and reposition your character in order to kill the enemies with your fire. But like I said, it is a great game. It's just, yeah, you have to really know what you're doing in order to be really good at it. Arkanoid, Revenge of Doe. This, of course, is the sequel to Arkanoid, which I talked about in, I think, episode 16, I think. And this one is, basically what it says. The story is now that you are trying to exact revenge for what you went through in the first game. And the level, like I said, this is a remix of Breakout, a genius version, or remix of Breakout, I should say. You are going through various levels, and the levels are harder. The action is faster, and it's really tough. I mean, I've only played Revenge of Doe maybe 3 times before I gave up on it, because as hard as Arkanoid could be, it would ramp up its difficulty on a sort of a gentle curve. On this one, the curve went to from 1 to 7, in the space of a level or two. And it was really tough, but I put it here because it deserves it. It's a good game in its own right. Okay, Bionic Commando. This one I was never really good at. I think only
It was either Connecticut Post Mall Arcade or Milford Rec that had it, but this was the only. But I played it a couple times and I just couldn't grok it, and I played it again in emulation just to see if I could figure it out, and I still couldn't grok it. I mean, it's a hard game. I mean, it didn't really get popular until the Nintendo Entertainment System version came out a couple of years later, but it deserves a shot, not a shot. It deserves a spot on my honorable mentions just because of the popularity it gained. Okay, Blasteroids. This is the the fourth, in my opinion, it's the fourth or the third sequel to Asteroids. It went Asteroids, Asteroids Deluxe, Space Duel, which not a lot of people really realize is a sequel to Asteroids, but it is. Um, so Space Duel, then Blasteroids. This one is not um, vector graphics like the previous three. This one is full raster, and there are different ways to get through the things you need to do. I mean, it's the premise is still kind of the same. You're still flying around destroying asteroids, except now you're having to go up against motherships every so often. Um, there are, I believe, three different modes that you can put your fighter in. One is your standard one. The one is a smaller version, which doesn't have as much firepower, or at least not as strong firepower, but it moves really fast. Then, of course, then there's the big one, which, of course, moves slowly, doesn't go very fast, but the firepower is enormous, and it's a really interesting game. I never really liked it that much, to be honest. I think it went too far away from what Asteroids was, but it is what it is. It's Atari. They just do what they wanted back in those days. Okay, Blasteroids. Dragon Spirit. This is a vertically scrolling shooter. Basically, you are a dragon trying to uh, get through various levels, just like most vertically scrolling shooters of the day. The power ups are very interesting. Um, One of them actually transforms your dragon into a two-headed dragon, and your firepower is just immense. Now you have aerial targets to deal with and ground targets to deal with. It's a lot of fun to play. I only played it a handful of times in arcades. I never could find it, but I did play it quite a bit in emulation over the years. But yeah, it deserves a spot here because it's not only is it a fun game to play, even though it can get frustrating at certain points. It's actually graphically very nice. It's very well done. But yeah, so yeah, Dragon Spirit, Galaga '88. This is the third sequel, or excuse me, second sequel to Galaga, because it went Galaga. Well, if we're going to be truly historically accurate, it's the third sequel to Galaxian, because it goes Galaxian, Galaga, Gapless, Galaga '88. With this one, um, it's not quite as frustrating as Gapless was, but it wasn't what I would call a lot of fun. I mean, it was pretty, it was a lot prettier, and there was lot more to the game. But I played it a couple times, and it's like, no, I just want Galaga. You know, and quite honestly, Namco was starting to get too cute. And that's something that a lot of these video game manufacturers fell victim to. They would get too cute with their sequels. Instead of sticking with what worked about about the game they're making a sequel about, and just making it better. I don't think they made it better, but it's not a bad game. It's just not quite my cup of tea, really. Gapless wasn't either, if I was going to be 100% honest, but either way, it deserves an honorable mention. Galaga '88. Karnov. This game, a lot of people love to play. Let's see, I've seen Karnov in Milford Rec. I've seen Karnov in the News Corner. I've seen it at Carl Graff's record store and a couple of other places.
and everywhere it went, people were playing it a lot. I never was good at it. It's one of these games that it's really unforgiving. And I just played it a little while before I started recording just to kind of get a feel for it and to remember how it was. And it is still brutally hard. It really is. But, there are a lot of people who swear by it. This game, even though it was like, you get hit by something once and you die, there's still like fantasy RPG elements. There were items to find, items to use, to get through various levels or to find things. And, I appreciated it. I remember I used to watch somebody who would play it at the News Corner, I think it was, and he was really good at it. And I would just watch him play it. And, that's how I learned the game, even though I was never good at it. So yeah, Karnov. Pac-Mania. This is basically Pac-Man with more 3D elements and a isometric view. Same things, except for now you have a little bit of a minor advantage in the game is that you can jump over the ghosts. And you have to basically plan it in a certain way so that you jump over them and you don't jump too soon and run into them, or jump too late and you don't clear them. You actually run into them before you're able to jump over them. But same thing as Pac-Man. You're going, basically trying to clear the maze of dots, and you're basically trying to lure the ghosts to power pellets. You eat them, eat the ghosts, get your scores up, and it just keeps going from there. It's like I said, it's just a different take on Pac-Man, which actually was kind of fun. Now that you actually had something that would help you in that. But yeah, Pac-Mania. R-Type. This is a vertically scrolling shooter. It got moderate interest in the arcades from what I remember, but I mean, it really started coming into its own in the home sectors. I think they had an art. Yeah, the R-Type I remember that really got everybody's interest was the R-Type for the Amiga of all computer systems, the Amiga one, because that one had the processing power to really do the game justice. I think there was a one for the Commodore 64. I'm pretty sure there was, but it wasn't nowhere near as good as the Amiga version, of course, because the Amiga was like 3 or 4 times the computer that the Commodore 64 was. But and basically it's an interesting take on the horizontal scrolling shooter. And it was pretty fun to play, but I never really got into it in the arcades. I think I played it like once or twice somewhere. I can't remember where, but it wasn't the scrolling shooter that really would tickle my fancy, so to speak. But it still deserves a mention. The real Ghostbusters. This let's okay. Let me just talk a little history here. Of course, this goes right along in stride with the actual Ghostbusters movie franchise that started back in started in what 1984, I think the movie came out. And the funny part is that in 1985, Filmation decided that they were going to do a Ghostbusters cartoon. And of course, everybody knew that it wasn't the real Ghostbusters, which is what everybody wanted. The real Ghostbusters didn't come out, I think, in the cartoons, I think, until 1986. It's either they came out in late 85 or early 86, somewhere in there. Because I remember there was a bit of a competition between these two cartoons for quite some time. And it just to me it was ridiculous. I don't see how Filmation got away with it, but somehow they did. I mean, I'll have to look it up in on Wikipedia or something because I'm really curious now. But anyway, getting back to this game, this is a vertically scrolling shooter where you are it's a multiplayer shooter as well, where you take on the characters of Ghostbusters, and you're going through these various levels and going to defeat various boss ghosts and getting through the level. And just basically going through the levels. And I think there's an end to it, but I'm not sure. I played it a little while ago, and I got past the first stage, but after that, I had other games to play, so I couldn't spend too much time on it. To be honest, I spent way too much time playing Blades of Steel. But anyway, but yeah, this one is much more true to the movie franchise. And you've got your you've got the familiar looking characters, you've got the right tech, and you've got various power-ups on the levels, and you actually have to, when you actually hit the ghost with your plasma gun or whatever it's called, I can't remember what it's called for the life of me now, but once you hit it with the energy beam, they turn into actual ghosts that you can capture. And then once you defeat the level boss, the end of level boss, then you actually are able to store those ghosts, and you get points. And if you store, I think it's 100 ghosts in the vault, you actually get a free guy. So yeah, I think there was no I don't think you got any free lives for a particular score. I think you had to just capture 100 ghosts and get your free guys that way. But yeah, it was interesting to see. Road Blasters. Oh man, this one, everybody loved playing this game when it first came out. This is a combat racing game by Atari. And it's futuristic. The graphics were interesting. The action was fast. It was fun to play. But yeah, the game could be just like a lot of games Atari put out in like the middle to late '80s. Is that they would just get so hard at one point where they're basically trying to eat your quarters or eat your tokens. Road Blasters was one of those games. I'm not trying to say that it should be like ridiculously easy, but at the same time, you shouldn't have to use Pythons to navigate the learning curve on the game. So I liked it. It was fun to play. It's just after I think like the first couple of levels, it just got really hard to the point of almost being unfair. You had to really be good to get past it and get through the various levels without running out of fuel, which would be game over, of course. It was fun, and it was really well done from a graphical standpoint, but yeah, it was really hard. Super Hang On. Of course, this is the sequel to Hang On. This game now is much more involved, much more immersive, because now like Hang On, or unlike Hang On, and like Outrun, which came out the year before, this one now had roads that not only moved left and right. Now you had to go up over hills. You had to navigate curves with hills, and so forth and so on. The action is a lot faster, even without the turbo button, because the turbo button was there for when you were able to run your motorcycle up to maximum, or not, yeah, maximum speed, which I think is like 280 kilometers an hour. Then you would hit the turbo button that would put you at like 324 or something like that. And the trick was using it on straightaways and not using it on really steep curves. They'll send you just flying right off the side, and you run into a rock or run into a tree and whatnot, and that would be that. But I mean, it's the same premise as Hang On. They had different types of music and things like that, but I found Super Hang On to be just as much fun once you learned how to play it. It took a little while for you to figure it out, but once you did, then you could have a lot of fun with that game. Tecmo Bowl. This game, I'm trying to remember the first place I saw it. I think it was Spanky's. I think Spanky's had Tecmo Bowl for a little while. I noticed they didn't have it for very long. But, basically this is one of the first true football arcade games, of the arcade era, where you had 15, excuse me, it was 11 on 11. It was it was the offensive line, it was the running backs, it was the wide receivers, the defensive line, linebackers, corners, safeties, the whole thing. It wasn't the it didn't really get a lot of attention. People were playing it, but after a while, I think they just sort of lost interest. It wasn't that interesting to them. I mean, the Tecmo Bowl franchise didn't come into its own until the Tecmo Bowl for the NES, and then Super Tecmo Bowl for the Super Nintendo. I thought that's when that gaming franchise really became legendary. Rastin. This one is, I love this game. I never was able to play it very often because it wasn't easily found. I think the News Corner had it for a little while, and maybe one other location which I can't remember. But of course, you are a sword swinging barbarian. You're going through these various levels to defeat monsters and to get to the end of the game, of course. This one had a lot of RPG elements to it. Your character had hit points. So if you got hit by an enemy or an enemy attack, it would take hit points off of your total. As you completed levels, your hit points would go up. At least I think that's how it was. I should have played it in emulation, but I'm just going off of strict memory here. But this one was fun because, like I said, it had a lot of D&D elements to it, and any video game, be it arcade or home, that had Dungeons and Dragons elements to them, I was all about. So I would play this. Anytime I saw it somewhere and I had a quarter on me, I'd play it. Final Lap. This is a game from, I think it's Namco, but this is one of the most. This and its sequel, Final Lap 2, these are the two most realistic Formula One racing games that I've ever played. I think these are more or less the sequels to Pole Position, because you're still running the same track, which is Fuji International Raceway, and the graphics are a lot better, a lot more intense. It's more realistic. You couldn't whip the wheel around when you turned your car because you'd spin your car out. You had to learn how to gently move your car so that you wouldn't run into other cars on the track, and then you would have to learn how to control how you would turn your car when you're hitting turns so that you wouldn't spin out or you wouldn't go flying off the track. And these games required a lot of money to learn how to play, let me tell you. The sequel to Final Lap, which is Final Lap 2, which I think came out in 1990, 89 or 90, but those are the ones I played a whole lot. I think I played the first Final Lap a couple of times in I wasn't in any of the local arcades. I think I was like on a trip with my family somewhere, if I'm not mistaken. But Final Lap 2 was when I found a couple of arcades in downtown Vancouver. I went to Vancouver in 1989, and they had a couple of really good arcades in downtown, which was, I went down there almost every day when I was there. And yeah, I mean, I played Final Lap 2 a lot, and basically it was the same as Final Lap, except now you could select different. Actually, no, I take that back. It was sort of like, yeah, that's right. It was kind of like what Daytona USA did. They had linked machines, and each machine had a different style of Formula One car. Like you had a McLaren, you had a Ferrari, you had a couple of other manufacturers that were rocking Formula One at the time. And I love those games. I mean, God only knows how much money I spent when I was up there, but, that's neither here nor there. If I really like a game, of course, I'm going to spend a lot of money on it if I could. So, anyway, those are my top 10s. You have any thoughts, opinions, stories involving any of these games? You know what to do. Get a hold of me, arcadeaddictbrian@gmail.com. Okay, let's go on to time for some Stragedy.
What happened?
Combat tactics, Mr. Ryan.
Oh, I never should have doubted you, boy!
There's a plan in everything, kid. And I love it when a plan comes together.
Hey, it's about time for me to employ a little tragedy.
Time for some Stragedy. Defender. Okay, I did an RU Experience segment back in episode 4 for Defender. Like I said, my first encounters with Defender were the James E. Strait shows in, at Seaside Park in my hometown. And that game was just so radically different from anything else I had played up until that point. It just captured a lot. It's captured my imagination and a lot of other people too. Defender is one of the all-time greats. But anyway, I'm going to give you some strategies, if you will, strategies for playing and getting good at Defender. The first thing you need to learn is to know how to work the controls properly. Like I said, Defender is really, really complex to play. You have, on the left side, you have an up and down stick, which moves your ship up and down. And right next to it, on a little bit of an angle, but right next to it is a reverse button, which of course reverses your fighter's field. You have a fire and thrust button. Fire, of course, fires your cannons. The thrust button, of course, sends your ship flying horizontally, which your attitude can be controlled by the up and down stick. Then you have the smart bomb button, which destroys all of your enemies on the screen. And then you have the hyperspace button, which is a last resort means of escape from a difficult situation, if you will. And my whole thing was I very rarely used the hyperspace button. I only used it if my situation was hopeless, because there was a really good chance that when you came out of hyperspace, your fighter would self-destruct and you'd lose a life. So I only used it when there was no other alternative. Let's see. Okay. And when you start the game, of course, you start on the first level, and you'll see they'll either teleport in or they'll start coming down from the top of the screen. You'll see landers. Each lander you destroy is 150 points. And take that back. I'm sorry, it's 100 points. And these landers will come down all the way down to just above ground level of the planet that you're flying in. And of course, you have 10 humanoid lives scattered around the planet. And these landers will fly until they get to their designated, the humanoid that they're designated. Then they'll duck down, and then they'll capture it, and they'll start moving straight up the screen to reach the top. Once it reaches the top, the lander turns into a mutant, and that humanoid is killed. And the landers, they're not that aggressive. Their mission is to capture humanoids. Once they turn into mutants, however, they are extremely aggressive. And as you progress in the game, they only get more and more so. So when you see a humanoid being captured, you want to fly over to that location as quickly as possible. Try to line it up so that you're slightly above the level of the lander that's capturing the humanoid. And that lander will basically just open fire. It'll run into your fire. You may have to dodge its return fire.
but then the humanoid will scream and start to fall. Once you do that, you thrust down to where it is, to pick it up. While it's in midair, you'll get 500 points for that. And if you decide to return it back to the plant, get another 500 points. So that's all that you face on the first level. My suggestion is to try to just get through that level and destroy all the landers as quickly as possible. Of course, if you take too long destroying all the enemies on a particular wave, baiters will start coming out. Baiters are these narrow, UFO-looking saucer enemies that are faster than your ship at full thrust. And they will basically chase you around, firing as they go, and they will try to destroy you. The trick to defeating baiters is when they get on the screen, what you want to do is the double reverse trick. The way the controls are set up, the stick is, you basically move that up and down. You basically grasp the stick with the fingers of your left hand. Basically, you want to keep your thumb off of the stick. You want to keep it like in a neutral position, because when you have to defend, the only way that you can do it and do it quickly is to flick that button with your thumb. And to defeat baiters, basically you have to reverse twice really quick. It's like 1, 2, and the baiter will be confused for about a second, which will, if depending on your positioning, might just give you enough time to destroy it. And the thing is, you can't get involved with shooting baiters either, because after a while they'll just start coming out like really fast and they'll overwhelm you. So in the first level, there are 2 different ways to get through it. Either shoot all the landers as quickly as possible, or you can try to get greedy and go for points and try to rescue landers, or rescue humanoids as the landers capture them. And then you capture and hold the humanoids while you are flying around. You just hold on to them until you get to like maybe 1 or 2 landers left, and then you just land them all, and then you get a whole bunch of points. That's the trick to point press on Defender, at least the first couple of levels. Then you move on to the second level. With this one, now there are pods. Pods contain swarmers. If you shoot a pod, you get 1,000 points, but as soon as you shoot the pod, all of the swarmers come out and they immediately start shooting at your ship at various levels. The way to defeat swarmers is to let them sweep by your fighter, and then you reverse immediately and thrust after them, because they'll keep, and if you do it right, you'll be an inch, maybe about an inch and a half behind them. Then you can kind of line them up and shoot them. If you let them get too far ahead of you, when you reverse the second time, they'll reverse back towards you and start shooting again. It's either that, or you can just fly straight through the swarmers and go about your business. On this level, you also have bombers. Bombers are these little purple squares that fly in a certain direction, and as they're flying, especially once your fighter is in the vicinity of them, they'll start dropping mines in the middle of the air. And if, of course, you run into them, you'll be destroyed. The trick to beating bombers is to... you can defeat them head on, but you're taking kind of a risk, because as they're flying, they're sort of modulating their altitude up and down as they're doing so. And unless you are really good at predicting where they're going to be flying, the best way to go is to fly through the formation, turn, and shoot at them while they're flying in the same direction while you're avoiding the mines they lay. That's the easy way to do it. Once again, now as you're going through these levels, when the landers start capturing humans, they start flying up towards the ceiling, or up towards the top of the screen faster. And as they're doing so, the mutants that
spawn from them, they move almost as fast as your fighter does in a straight line, but they're also like weaving and dodging as they're doing so, which of course makes them a little harder to hit. The easiest way to defeat mutants, if they're flying towards you, you want to get as far below where the mutant is and fly straight ahead, full thrust, and then you want to basically, once you get a little distance, you want to come up, hit the reverse button, and just lay down a field of fire, and hopefully you destroy it. And most often, if you don't, they're going to run into you, or they'll shoot you and kill you. So yeah, level 2 is the bombers, and the pods. Level 3, now they have multiple pods. They'll have 3 pods. And what you want to do is to fly to the location where they're all sort of intersecting, because some will be flying in one direction, one will be flying in another direction. So the place where they intersect is where you want to go to that location and hit your smart bomb button. Sometimes if you're flying too fast when you hit the smart bomb button, it will release swarmers. If you do it in the right way, you'll pretty much destroy all of the pods and all the swarmers contained therein, which will give you a ton of points, which is good for getting your extra lives. Most Defender machines I've played, you get free lives every 10,000 points. I have played a couple of machines where it's been every 15,000. But basically, when you get a free life, you get a free life and an extra smart bomb. And now, as like I said, the action continues to ramp up and ramp up and ramp up the more levels you finish. If you allow the last 10th and last humanoid to be captured by a lander and turned into a mutant, the planet explodes, and now all the landers that are left turn into mutants, which is very difficult to deal with. And let's see, yeah, and it just continues on from there. The landers move faster, they shoot more aggressively at you. The best thing to do to kill landers is to fly down to about an inch, or maybe about a half inch above the surface of the planet, and just hit the fire and thrust buttons together. Just do it that way, because it keeps a certain velocity for your fighter going, and it makes you a little more difficult for the landers to hit you, but then you're also delivering fire in a certain direction. And of course, while you're thrusting along the surface, you want to sort of like move up and down just a little bit to vary where your fire goes, so that you can not only make yourself a little more difficult for the landers to hit you, but you also line up the landers as well. And another trick to kind of keep yourself going when you are in, say, the 4th wave, because every 5 waves the planet's population regenerates. So let's say you basically got through a level 4 where the planet got destroyed. If you get through that level, then you are able, on the 5th level, the planet regenerates and you have 10 more humanoids to protect. When you finish a stage, you get a bonus of 100 points times the level of the times the level that you're on, up to level 5. I think it goes from like 100 points per humanoid rescued up to 500. I think that's how it goes. So it's in your best interest to preserve as many humanoids as possible. But if you're in a position where there's one humanoid left, you can do what I call playing defense, because every lander that's on that level, on that wave, is going to go after that humanoid. And basically you don't want to fly too far away from the humanoid. You basically just want to go and shoot the landers as they're approaching. And that's one way to do it, to play defense. Just defend that one humanoid against all the other enemies and just take them all out. The other way to play defense when you've got one humanoid left is let a lander capture it and you rescue it, and then you just fly around the rest of the level, rest of the wave with the humanoid under your ship. That's the other way to do it. And of course, the action continues and continues until you lose all your lives and the game's over. Some other tips that I can give is don't go crazy with your smart bombs. There are going to be times where, for whatever reason, the landers have captured a bunch of humanoids and there are a lot of mutants flying around and they're all trying to take you out, and you may have to use smart bombs to destroy them. You more or less want to save your smart bombs for the pods and for absolute emergencies. Any other things going on, don't use it. Rely upon, your skill to deal with your enemies in the conventional manner. Let's see. Oh, what else? I think that's more or less it. The highest score I've gotten in the last 5 years was when I went to Pinball Pete's. I think I talked about it in an On the Road segment. I scored 145,000 points or something like that. That's the best I've done at a Defender arcade machine since 8th grade. Since I was 15 years old, or 14 I should say. But anyway, those are my tips and strategies for Defender. I could find some more tips from some of the how to beat arcade machine books that I have, but I'm just going off of what's in my head at the time. I think I'm forgetting a couple of things, but I think I've got most of it out there for you to try if you're so inclined. If you have any other tips of your own, Mark, I know you're listening. I know you have tons of tips as far as this game goes. If anyone else has anything, they want to share with the rest of the community, get a hold of me, arcadeaddictbrian@gmail.com. Another thing you can do is go to the Facebook page and just start posting. I check that page daily. I'm on Facebook every day, like I said earlier in this podcast. So, that's probably, aside from emailing, the best way to get a hold of me. And you could also contribute to the Confessions of an Arcade Addict Facebook page, and we could get a community going, and, let's see what happens there. But anyway, let's move on. It's time for an arcade review. Arcade review. The Connecticut Pulse Mall Arcade. Okay. Like I've said, I have 5 criteria for when I review an arcade. Those 5 are location, selection, ambiance, functionality, and value. Pretty self-explanatory. Location, is it easy to get to? Is there plenty of parking when you get there? Things like that. Selection, how many games do they have? How varied is the actual selection? Because the way I rate this, you could have an arcade that's got maybe 10 or 15 machines, but if they have a really good spread, meaning that the selection of games from, depending on the games from from various eras, if they're all represented, I can give high marks for that. But yeah, most of the time, if you've got a large selection of machines, yeah, you'll score points there. I'm not gonna lie. Ambiance. Let's see, are there any other things to capture the attention aside from the games? Is there music playing over the PA? Are there pictures? Is there artwork? Are there other things for you to kind of look at and say, oh, that looks pretty cool? Things like that. I mean, also, to a lesser extent, are the staff helpful? Do they not care about what you're doing? Are they actually attentive when you come to them with a problem? Or do they just blow you off? you know, let's see. Functionality. How do the games work? Are they beat up? Are the controls not quite standard? Are the machines in poor looking condition? When a machine breaks down, does it take a long time for them to get it fixed? Things of that nature. A well-maintained arcade will always get high points from me. And lastly, value. Do they run on tokens? Do they run on quarters? Are they a free play model? Are the machines themselves more expensive to play? Are there other things in the place, like say vending machines, or maybe even a restaurant attached to it, or something like that? Are there other things to make the experience better? They're all in this category. So anyway, let's get on with it. Location, I give it a 6. The Connecticut Post Mall is off of exit 39B, off of I-95. And so being that close to a major highway, it gets slightly above average marks, even though for me it was hard to get to. Just like Milford Rec. When I reviewed Milford Rec, I gave it a 6. I'm going to give this a 6 as well. Same marks. Selection, I'll give this a 7. The place wasn't big in size, although the management put as many machines in the arcade as they could. I think at the most they had somewhere between 30 and 40 machines, which is a decent selection for an arcade. I mean, for my personal, to call a place with video games a true arcade, I think you have to have at least 25 machines. A bare minimum of 25. I mean, if you are a good arcade, you probably have up over 50. But yeah, so I would call this just a halfway decent arcade. But I give it a 7 because not only they had a wide selection, but they also had games that Milford Rec didn't have. And I've said this about it when I did my arcade rundown about Connecticut Post Mall. That was one of the things that really made the place stand out, in my opinion. It gave, just because they knew, I think, they couldn't compete directly with Milford Rec, so they said, well, let's do this. And I think that worked for them. Ambiance, I'll give that a 6. There weren't a lot of things to draw the eye, aside from the actual machines, but if I remember correctly, they had the same radio station, which I think was WPLR in New Haven, playing over the PA. So, you had music going. And I think they had some black lighting too, but I can't remember 100%. There weren't that many times where I went there where it was at night. The only times I did where it was nighttime was when I was with Mark. Usually, if I was there by myself and it was nighttime, it was time for me to go home. Because I had buses to catch or I had a train to catch. So yeah, I had to get my butt right back on down the post road towards the train station to, get on home. Okay, functionality. I'll give that a 7. There weren't that many machines that were out of order whenever I went there. And the ones that were there were in good condition and worked well. It seemed to me, at least, that the machines were pretty well tended and looked after. And to me, that's important for an arcade. It's just as well how the machines look as how they play. That's, at least to me, that's what I think. When you're running an arcade, yeah, your machines need to look decent as well as play well. So yeah, I'll give that a 7. And value, I'll give that a 6.5. The arcade ran on tokens, and they would run the normal specials of the day. 5 tokens for $1, 25 for 5. They didn't run the crazy specials that Milford Rec and Spanky's did, but it was still solid value. You got your money's worth when you were there. Okay, you add all that up together, and you get a total score of 6.5. Above average. The place couldn't, like I said, they couldn't compete directly with the juggernaut that was Milford Rec, but they did something that was pretty smart, rather. They got machines that Milford Rec did not have, which was saying something, because Milford Rec had well up over 100 machines in the early to mid 80s. And they were only getting more, and it was just, you could easily drop $20 in Milford Rec and wonder where your money went. It made the Connecticut Post Mall made a good alternative to Milford Rec. It was a great adjunct to it, and it made a good start to an arcade run. I mean, especially when Gompers was open. So you basically had, in a 4-mile stretch of the Boston Post Road, going through Milford heading towards Orange, you had 3 arcades like right there. So you could go start at Connecticut Post Mall, go to Milford Rec, spend the majority of your time and money there, and if you were so inclined, you could just go to Gompers and, play some other games that Milford Rec didn't have. And these 3 arcades were pretty important for that area, because back in those days, the early 80s going towards the mid 80s, these places had a lot of business going on, even during the weekdays, which was important. The Connecticut Post Mall arcade was a small place, especially in comparison to Milford Rec, which was huge and would only get bigger over the years, but it was pretty decent. It was a nice place to go. I mean, of course, if you were shopping at the mall or your parents were shopping at the mall, they could give you, $2 or $3, and you could go to the arcade and spend it and have some time while your parents did shopping, which was what a lot of people did, apparently, because there were a lot of kids in those arcades every time I went there. But yeah, that's the Connecticut Post Mall arcade. If you grew up in the Milford area, or you went to these arcades a lot back in those days, get a hold of me at arcadeaddictbrian@gmail.com. I'd love to know what you thought of the place, what you remember of it, because I'm going strictly off memory when it comes to these places, and, well, considering, that's more than 35 years removed, going on 40, yeah, my memory's not so great. I mean, I have a decent memory, but it could, when it comes to this stuff, remembering back almost 40 years is kind of tough. But anyway, yeah, get a hold of me at arcadeaddictbrian@gmail.com. Let me know what you know. Okay, finally, we are going to go on to home systems. Stay tuned.
There's no place like home.
Look, this is not a game, Mac.
Screw you guys, I'm going home.
Shall we play a game?
Love to.
Screw you guys, I'm going home.
Clear a path! I'm going home!
Home systems. The Commodore 64. I can't even begin to tell you guys the experiences I've had with this system. I own one. I've owned one since 1987. But my experiences with it go right back to the year it came out in 1982. But let me read some information. Some information. Who am I kidding? This is quite a bit of information, folks. So settle in. This is going to take a little bit. Okay. From Wikipedia. The Commodore 64, also known as the C64 or the CBM64, is an 8-bit home computer introduced in January 1982 by Commodore International, first shown at the Consumer Electronics Show in Las Vegas, January 7th through the 10th, 1982. It is listed in the Guinness Book of World Records as the highest-selling single computer model of all time, with independent estimates placing the number sold between 10 and 17 million units. Wow. I knew they sold a lot of them, but that's just a whole nother level. To continue. Volume production started in early 1982, marketing in August for $595 US. That's the equivalent of $1,545 in 2018 money. Preceded by the Commodore VIC-20 and the Commodore PET, the C64 took its name from the 64 kilobytes of RAM.
With support for multicolored sprites and a custom chip for waveform generation, the C64 could create superior visuals and audios compared to systems without such custom hardware. The C64 dominated the low-end computer market for most of the 1980s. From a substantial period from 1983 to 1986, the C64 had between 30 and 40% of the share of the US market and 2 million sold per year, outselling IBM PC compatibles, Apple computers, and the Atari 8-bit family of computers. Sam Tramiel, a later Atari president and the son of Commodore's founder, said in a 1989 interview, quote, "When I was at Commodore, we were building 400,000 C64s a month for a couple of years," unquote. In the UK market, the C64 faced competition from the BBC Micro and the ZX Spectrum, but the C64 was still one of the two most popular computers in the UK. Part of the Commodore 64's success was its sale in regular retail stores instead of only electronics or computer hobbyist specialty stores. Smart move. Commodore produced many of its parts in-house to control costs, including custom integrated circuit chips from MOS technology. It has been compared to the Ford Model T automobile for its role in bringing a new technology to middle-class households via creative and affordable mass production. Approximately 10,000 commercial software titles have been made for the Commodore 64, including development tools, office productivity applications, and video games. C64 emulators allow anyone with a modern computer or a compatible video game console to run these programs today. The C64 is also credited with popularizing the computer demo scene and is still used today by some computer hobbyists. In 2011, 17 years after it was taken off the market, research shows that brand recognition for the model was still at 87%. I could go on to relegate the history of Commodore, which goes from its origins in 1981 going all the way to 1994, but I will not do that. The history is long. Look it up on Wikipedia. It's a very interesting story, but I'm going to keep it on a more personal note. And I might as well start now. Like I said, I was a Commodore 64 owner from 1987 until I had to leave my things behind when I moved to Florida in 1993. But my experiences with the system go way back and are numerous, almost too many to relate here or to even rack my brain to try and remember. The first time I ever experienced a Commodore 64, I was walking through Reed's department store, and they had a Commodore VIC-20, a Timex Sinclair, and a Commodore 64 in this little area, directly across from their TV department. And I remember I had some very, 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 very minor experience using BASIC, which goes back to the CompuColor store that was in my neighborhood, but that's another story for another time. Of course, so I knew how to program a never-ending loop of whatever I wanted to say on a computer screen, and I would do that, saying all kinds of, shall we say, immature things. I mean, come on, it's 1982, I'm 13 years old. What do you expect from me? So that was my first experience. Then I think later in 1982, my friend Mark, he had a Commodore 64, and he started inviting me over to his house to hang out and so forth. And he had a Commodore 64, and he would show me all the games and stuff that he had. And he had quite a bit, actually. Let's see. Smash cut to September of 1983. Or did he get it for Christmas? Now I can't remember. It was one of the two. But my best friend Robert, he got a Commodore 64 for, I want to say he got it for his birthday. It may have been Christmas that year, but I think it was his birthday. So I used to, we used to go over, I used to go over his house and we'd play games on it after school. And, he didn't have very many games to start, but I would fix that in later years. After texting my friend Edgar a few days ago, he got his system in the summer of 1985 as a graduation present when he graduated 8th grade. Let's see. And like I said, I got mine 2 years later in 1987. By this time, they were starting to sell the Commodore 64C, which was a little bit more ergonomically designed system. It was exactly the same as a regular Commodore 64, except it had a wedge-shaped case, and the keys in the case were a light gray, and the function keys were dark gray. And it also had a third-party Geos, it had Geos program, which kind of looked something like the Macintosh interface. I mean, it wasn't as sophisticated, nowhere even close to sophisticated as a comparable Macintosh computer of the day, but it still looked nice. I still have my Commodore 64. It's in my closet as of right now. It still works. The problem is the disk drives that I had when my mother originally bought the computer for me, which were FSD1 not hard drives. Yeah, you can tell. It's been a while. FSD1 floppy drives, which operated more efficiently than the 1541 drives, because that was one of the problems with the 1541, is that they tended to overheat. And of course, that would lead to all kinds of problems if you were, say, playing a game that had to access the disk quite a bit. That would lead to problems with that. My memories are, I have tons of memories of going over Rob's house, going over Edgar's house, and playing games, and, having all kinds of fun, as, teenage guys tend to do, at least geeky teenage guys, that is. Let's see. I mean, I have a storytime segment called Friendly Competition, which is coming up. But to give you a little bit of a hint as to what that's about, some of the things that me and my friend Walter, who also got a Commodore 64, I think he got his after I did. I think he got his in '88. Myself, Walter, Edgar, and a couple of mutual friends, we all used to get together at my house, or at a couple of times at Walter's place, and a couple of times at Edgar's place. We also used to get together and just have these massive game playing sessions, these competition things where we would just pick a game, like, say, Summer Games by Epix, or let's see, Epic's Professional Wrestling, GBA 2-on-2 basketball, and we would have these massive tournaments. And of course, you know how it is when you've got a bunch of, teenage kids playing games against each other. Of course, we're, trying to mess each other up, and the trash talking is flowing hot and heavy, and, we're just having a blast no matter where we were at. I remember my friend Dave, he had an Apple II. He had an Apple IIe. I remember that. Him and myself and Edgar, we used to go over Rob's house
and we would play games like role-playing games like Fantasy, and we would like take control of one particular character. We would like it was sort of like playing D&D on the computer in games. We would take one character, and then we would take turns with each one of our characters, selecting actions and so forth. And we used to play all kinds of games and compete and talk trash and all that kind of stuff. And I was just, I mean, I have nothing but good things to say about the Commodore 64. You'll never get me to say anything bad about it, because not only was it a great computer, and it was a wonderful, fantastic game machine. I mean, at that time in the middle to late 80s, when the Nintendo Entertainment System had a stranglehold on the market, and the only two systems that even lessened that hold were the Commodore 64 and the Sega Genesis, which would come out in 88 or 89, one of the two. But yeah, I mean, and then one of the other things that I really begged my mother to do when I got my Commodore 64, when she was going to get it for me, is that I wanted to get a modem, because at that time I had knowledge of a multi-line chat system in our area called D-Dial. And that basically was 6 Apple computers interlinked and all hooked up to 6 phone lines. Or actually, I think it was 7, because the actual SysOps computer, I think he had, I think it was 7, because yeah, you had the SysOps computer, which was on a separate line. But yeah, I mean, I was on that starting when I was going over Mark's house, like in 83, 84, something like that, and I thought that was the coolest thing in the world, because you actually got to talk to other people in real time, which was, in its, I mean, there's little else like it at the time. We're talking like the early to mid 80s, like from 83 until 85 or 86. And that was one of the best things that I loved about the Commodore, is that, their peripherals, like their disk drives, like their modems, they were not horribly expensive either. And then, of course, I discovered BBSs, and, that also led to link parties on D-Dial, where we would link to New Jersey would link to, like, Houston would link to Vancouver, and so forth and so on. So you got to talk to people all over the continent, which was awesome, because there wasn't anything like that back in those days, that you really knew about. So the Commodore 64 it was such a huge part of my life from 1987 until 1993, when I had to leave it behind when I moved to Florida. I did grab all my stuff in 2005. It's with me now. It still works. I mean, aside from the fact the space bar is not, it just, let's put it this way. When I was using it, I used it a lot. Of course, I was using it on BBSs and chat systems and so forth, and the key contacts would wear out. And I had to take it to my friend John, who knew how to fix that. And, and John, my friend John, who was like a major contributor to like software exchange, because that was a big thing back in the days, if you knew somebody, or if you were really good at, good with the computer, and you knew of places online that you could download stuff from. Mind you, it took a hell of a long time, even at like 2400 baud, But yeah, if you knew somebody, you'd just go over his house with like a, 10 pack or 25 pack of
5 1/4 inch floppies, and you brought the programs you had and the games you had, and you would share. And I've got hundreds, if not thousands, of games for my Commodore 64. I was actually thinking about going back through my disc cases and finding out what kind of games I had, just so that I could see if I could find these games in emulation. I think there are at least a couple of websites just off the top of my head where I could find probably 85 to 90% of everything that I owned for the Commodore 64. But anyway, this is a wonderful, wonderful computer. This is historic in its place. It has its place. Like it said, it's the most, the highest selling computer system or computer of all time. As many as 17 million units around the world. That's crazy. I knew the Commodore 64 sold a lot, but I didn't think it sold that many. But that should tell you how popular that system was all the way into the 90s. My buddy Edgar said to me when we were texting back and forth about it, he told me that he still keeps up with a bunch of some C64 enthusiasts in Germany. And, when we were talking about it, I asked him, when did you get your system? And then he told me, and then we just started talking about all the stuff we were doing, all the things that were going on and things like that. But yeah, the Commodore 64 is just a computer system that has, a place in my heart, and has, had opened up my world greatly. I probably wouldn't be where I am right now if I didn't own a Commodore 64 back in the day. And that's just how it is. So, I could go on and on and on about it, but I'm just going to leave it be for now. So, I mean, I'm pretty sure there are at least a couple of people out there, in my small but growing listening audience that have had a Commodore 64, or may even still have it. If you've got thoughts and stories about your time with a Commodore 64, please, by all means, get a hold of me at arcadeaddictbrian@gmail.com. Alright, so this will bring episode 18 to a close. I will get this edited, and I will get it out as soon as possible. And I will turn and look at episode 19 coming up soon. So, again, stay tuned. Until next time, this is Brian saying, have fun out there, good gaming, au revoir.
This has been the Confessions of an Arcade Addict podcast. All music has been provided by Kevin MacLeod. You can find his music at incompetech.com. You can contact the show by email at arcadeaddictbrian@gmail.com, or you can call and leave a voicemail at 734-743-2433. Until next time, you have been listening to the Confessions of an Arcade Addict podcast. See you then.